What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Monday, May 18th, 2020, start of a brand new week of insanity. We've got a lot to talk about here. And as usual, the hour number one will be news and hour number two will be phone calls. So let's get right on into it. Everybody's trying to sort of reopen and get life going again after all this coronavirus nonsense. And over the weekend, NASCAR had a race, no fans in the stand, and it was kind of eerie when the winner came into the winner's circle, and it was just like dead silence, which is kind of a real shock for anybody who's a racing fan here. There was also a charity golf game. Again, no spectators, but Donald Trump apparently called into that one as well. Apparently at NASCAR, fans still turned up to cheer outside the track and have tailgate parties. So everybody's kind of, they're straining at the leash, I think is a good way to put at it, and we're seeing it all across the country. All righty, Trump is doubling down and calls Obama a grossly incompetent president hours after branding him and Biden corrupt in the unmasking of Michael Flynn and saying that they both should be in jail, which at this point I'm starting to agree. Okay, now yesterday morning, Donald Trump demanded that former President Obama, former Vice President Joe Biden faced jail time for involvement in the Michael Flynn case, and the president followed up with a tweet insisting he was elected due to his predecessor's corrupt administration. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think Donald Trump won the election because nobody can stand Hillary Clinton. That was certainly my motivation. Okay. But Trump versus Obama, they're definitely getting into, it's like pro wrestling, you see them slamming each other down on the mat there, back and forth. But from the beginning, Russiagate was always about Barack Obama, not Donald Trump. And it's building up. Now, the Democrats want this to go away. They're already out there saying this is all a conspiracy theory. There's nothing there. Russiagate is real, but the unmasking of Michael Flynn, that's a conspiracy theory. It tells you how far through the looking glass we all are here. But it's clear that Obama was always the vector through which the entire investigation into Donald Trump pointed. He's the only one with the power to have marshaled all of the forces arrayed against Trump in the past 4 years. And what a waste of time and taxpayer money that has all turned out to be. But it comes down to one simple fact. Donald Trump was not a Russian agent. Donald Trump was not a Russian agent. Donald Trump was not a Russian agent. If anybody was a Russian agent, it was Hillary Clinton. Look at the Uranium One deal. I wish somebody would look at the Uranium One deal. Oh, that's just another conspiracy theory. That Uranium One, that's another conspiracy theory. That's not real. The P dossier, that's real. That's real. Pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to any of the other stuff here. Now, Senator Lindsey Graham is out there talking about the Flynn case, and he came out saying no one is above the law, not even Obama. Now, this is an abrupt about-face from what he was saying last week, where he said he was not going to put Obama under oath to testify because it would be bad for the nation. Now, obviously, it would be bad for Obama, but now all of a sudden he's out there saying no one is above the law. Is he really going to put Obama under oath and have him testify, or is he just trying to salvage his reputation? Time will tell on that one here. All right, so we're going to talk about coronavirus a little bit because that's all that anybody in the corporate media is talking about. There's a gentleman by the name of D.A. Henderson. He was the man who eradicated smallpox. And his study found that draconian lockdowns for flu pandemics were ineffective, even destructive. Well, golly, look at that lesson from history we should have been paying more attention to. D.A. Henderson was an American medical doctor, educator, and epidemiologist who directed a 10-year international effort from 1967 to 1977 that eradicated smallpox throughout the world. Dr. Henderson was later the dean of the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. So this is a guy who walks his talk. And he's out there saying that draconian lockdowns are ineffective and dangerous. Anyway. Meanwhile, we're seeing quarantine fatigue intensify. People are getting out there. They're just saying, I'm not going to stay indoors anymore. I'm getting cabin fever. The furniture's starting to talk to me. So people are flocking to New York City area bars and beaches. Crowds boozing it up on the Upper East Side elicit tough words from Mayor de Blasio, who was promising strict enforcement after throngs of New Yorkers were spotted carousing and quaffing cold ones on the Upper East Side Saturday night. I'm not comfortable at all with people congregating outside bars, His Honor said on a Sunday press conference. Okay. Now, the New York City beaches will not open on Memorial Day. At least that's the theory. I'm almost willing to bet a whole nickel that they'll be crowded anyway. Bill de Blasio threatens to close them off with fences, as well as hitting out at partygoers congregating outside bars on the streets of Manhattan. Now, a federal judge in North Carolina has issued an order to allow churches to resume indoor worship. The Democratic governor disagrees. Have you noticed that it's the Democrats who want these lockdowns to continue? They want you angry. They want you upset. They're absolutely convinced that they can direct your anger at Donald Trump. See, it's all Donald Trump's fault. But Donald Trump is out there saying, let's get back to business. Let's open up the economy. And by the time November rolls around here, you're going to have a lot of people who are angry with Democrats as a class. And they will feel it, not just in the race for the White House, not just in the race for the Congress, but small jurisdictions all across the country. You're going to see them change hands. We're already starting to see it. Out in California, a Republican politician won like the first changeover seat from a Democrat in something like 20 years. So anyway, there's a temporary restraining order that allows North Carolina churches to hold indoor worship services. Around here, they're still doing it virtually. Down in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is announcing plans to ease the ban on vacation rentals across the state with one qualifier. Visitors from the Big Apple won't be able to book rooms or houses because New York appears to be the epicenter of the infection. Even though they showed up in Washington first, New York appears to be the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in this country. Now, the lockdown rules imposed by Democrats face legal challenges, including a dozen in California alone, from residents and state officials who claim they are too excessive. And I'm hearing this from people I know in California. I'm getting emails from people in California saying it's ridiculous. It is utterly ridiculous. And as one example here, to try and keep the protesters from protesting, they can't ban the American flag, okay, but they're going to ban flagpoles. If you're out there protesting the coronavirus lockdowns, you're not allowed to have a flagpole. Of course, you can still hold a flag up, you know, with two hands. It's silly. It is really absurdly silly. What is wrong with the American flag that Californians don't like it? Oh, and speaking of California, this started there, but it's spreading across the country. Apparently, KKK hoods are apparently the new COVID-19 fashion statement. Somebody wore one into one of the big box stores and caused a bit of a stir. And somebody said, look, it's a facial covering. It's blocking the breath from the mouth. And even more importantly, it's providing additional protection for the eyes, which we now know are a vector for infection by COVID-19. So apparently people are starting to make up their own little KKK hoods. And I think this is a good thing because you know why? You're going to take away the shock value of the KKK hood. It won't be meaning anything anymore. It's like when Israel overuses the term anti-Semite. After a while, people stop caring. Yeah, anti-Semite, who cares? KKK hood, who cares? We give far too much power to symbols. I know Robert Langdon would disagree with me on that. For those of you who follow the Da Vinci Code books. But I think it would be a good thing if we stop letting KKK hoods upset us or certain words upset us. Sort of recapture our own calm center. Anyway, Tucker Carlson went on the air the other day and he blasted Nancy Pelosi for her plan to have taxpayer-funded payments for illegal immigrants in her new proposed coronavirus relief bill. Now, it's already passed the House of Representatives, which is Democrat control. but it is headed for a failure in the Senate, which is still under the control of the GOP. And in any event, Donald Trump has already said he's going to veto the thing if it should somehow pass the Senate. And by the way, Democrats in the House voted against it. It was not a slam dunk. It was very, very close. And it's your basic liberal Democrat wish list: money for the arts, money for this, money for Planned Parenthood, money for the illegal immigrants. All the stuff they're going to campaign on come November. We, the Democrats, we got you money. We got you free money. Reminds me of the first Batman movie, the one with Michael Keaton. Jack Nicholson played the Joker, and he says, who do you trust? I'm giving out free money. Well, that's good imitation of Nancy Pelosi right there. I'm giving out free money, except it's not free. She's not paying for it, of course. We are. Talk about buying votes. And a reminder, the illegal immigrants aren't supposed to vote. Boy, Nancy Pelosi is sure courting them, isn't she? Oxford University has struck a deal with AstraZeneca to produce 30 million doses of vaccine the moment it's proved to work. And Britain will get first access to a coronavirus vaccine being developed by Oxford. And apparently it's currently in clinical trials. Now, and a lot of people over here are looking at the vaccines. They're looking askance at Bill Gates and mandatory vaccines. And Donald Trump has gone public to assure everybody the vaccine is not going to be mandatory. He came out and said, not everybody's going to want to get the vaccine. Okay, he made this admission last week during his COVID-19 press conference. Trump told a reporter that we're looking for a full vaccine for everyone that wants to get it. Not everybody's going to want to get it. So at least as of right now, as far as the public presentation from the president, it's an option. You want the vaccine, you can get it. If you don't want the vaccine, you're not going to get it. I'm not going to get it, at least until I see that it doesn't hurt anybody else, like we saw back in 1976. Okay, now over at Imperial College, an expert there is warning a coronavirus vaccine is unlikely to be ready this year, and urges people not to have false expectations after ministers say they're hoping to have these 30 million doses ready by September. Now, mind you, this is the same Imperial College that came out with the predictions of 2.2 million dead in the U.S. And there's been a little bit of a development on that because experts are now looking at the computer code that was used by Neil Ferguson, and they're finding totally gaps in there. Article out of domagood.com is out there saying the code is totally unreliable. The numbers it produced are just absolute garbage. And of course, the media selected the most dramatic number, the most sensational number, 2.2 million dead, and everybody reacted to that. That was the worst case number that would supposedly happen if nobody did anything, and now we're finding out that number was wrong to begin with. It's being described in some circles, like Zero Hedge, as the most devastating software mistake of all time. Now, Neil Ferguson and the authors of the Imperial published its modeling for non-pharmaceutical intervention for COVID-19. And a number of data scientists have taken a close look and found gaping oversights, problems that seriously undermine the model's credibility. Of course, Neil Ferguson has now had to step down from his job when he was caught violating lockdown to carry on with his married mistress, who's not married to Neil Ferguson, but to somebody else. I wonder what's going on at their dinner table right now. All right, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is out there talking about how do we get reliable information? And he's out there saying that fake news pusher Bill Gates controls fact checker and PolitiFact line on vaccines. Now, Bill Gates is heavily invested in vaccines. In fact, right now, Bill Gates is the world's largest vaccine producer. He's the single largest donor to the World Health Organization and the CDC Foundation. These agencies are now marketing arms for his vaccine empire. CDC has a financial motive to push vaccines. They own the patents on about 30 of them. just coincidentally happen to be that list of vaccines that your child must have to be allowed to go to school. Now, back in 2019, Gates had the World Health Organization declare vaccine hesitancy the top global health threat, with Ebola, cancer, war, and drug-resistant pathogens, signaling a worldwide pharma gold rush to mandate vaccines to all people. That's what he wants. The man who gave us Windows Vista Edition and Millennium Edition wants to stick a needle in everybody's arm and hope for the best. By the way, Gates maxed out in donations to Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff's PAC. Now, I don't have a problem with people being rich. I'd like to be rich myself, to be very honest about it. But I do have a concern about people with that kind of money, whether it's Bill Gates or George Soros, who think that money gives them the right to start tinkering with the world in service to some ideology they may have, because they're not elected to rule over us. We have not given our consent to be governed by Bill Gates or George Soros or who all else. Does it right in the Declaration of Independence? Governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. I don't consent. Bill, George, take a hike. Anyway, England suffered more coronavirus deaths than Italy during the peak of the outbreak, academics say, amid claims ministers are covering up the impact of COVID-19 in the UK by ditching global comparison charts. And apparently the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine researchers looked at total excess mortality in countries. And Italy's outbreak peak occurred back on March 27th with 15,000 fatalities that week, 103% higher than average. So there is a real virus out there. It's really making people sick. It's really killing them. And everybody who's saying, you know, it doesn't feel like it's real. I understand that. There's a disconnect there. It doesn't feel like there's a real threat out there. You can't see it. You can't smell it. You can't see it. They're not carrying a flag. The little virus particles don't have a little flag to wave at you. By the way, I was noticing over at the local CVS pharmacy, they've got a rack full of DVDs, dual feature. You know, there's two movies on the single DVD, and I kid you not, one of them that was for sale on that rack was a combination of Outbreak with Contagion. And already I'm regretting that I didn't buy it. Johns Hopkins data shows that COVID-19 deaths have declined in the United States for the fourth consecutive week. Well, there's a huzzah, huzzah right there for you. Okay. Colorado government pushes back against CDC's coronavirus death counts after state lowers the death toll by nearly 300. Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar confirmed Sunday there has not been a spike of coronavirus cases in states that have reopened. Now, that's something to pay attention to. We're not seeing this. We were told when you reopen the states, there's going to be a flood of new cases. It's not happening, at least not yet. Down in San Diego, officials have revealed that only 6 of the county's nearly 200 reported COVID deaths are solely due to the coronavirus. The rest all had other issues that could have been equally fatal. They were trying to inflate the figures so they didn't look like fools, because the numbers just don't match those predictions that came out of Imperial College. And now we know the computer code that was used to generate those predictions was garbage. It was buggy. Somebody pulled an all-nighter, put together some code, got some impressive-looking numbers, and they went to town with them. Okay, we're going to take a break here for some commercials. When we come back, continue with the coronavirus and other news, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here, and a reminder that Republic Broadcasting Network is in a perpetual fundraiser, and that's because we need your help to keep on doing what we're doing, which is speaking truth to power and trying to restore the Republic. So, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas 78664. The phone number, pardon me, the phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. All right, getting on back to the news here. We're still talking about coronavirus. And apparently up to 20% of patients in hospital with coronavirus contracted it while they were being treated for another illness in that hospital. And apparently during a national briefing in April by the NHS, medical directors and nurses were told that between 10 and 20% of those with the virus contracted it while being treated for another health problem. So anyway, China is issuing a warning about the lack of immunity for a second wave of coronavirus. After weathering that initial outbreak, life in China is returning to normal. However, the government's senior medical advisor is already raising alarms about the big challenge of a possible second wave of infections, which will remain a serious concern until a vaccine becomes widely available. Now, here's the problem with that. You can have a vaccine for the coronavirus that's going around now. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for a second version, which is likely to going to be mutated. So we'll see what's happening there. And apparently Beijing begins construction of a new biolab. Like they're not already in enough public relations trouble with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And China is still denying it was the source of the coronavirus pandemic. Australia is leading a bunch of nations saying we need to investigate. And apparently Peter Navarro on Sunday expanded. He accused China of deliberately seeding the world with the China virus through air travel. That, I think, is a little bit over the top. So the Chinese, behind the shield of the World Health Organization for 2 months, hid the virus from the world and then sent hundreds of thousands of Chinese on aircraft to Milan, New York, and around the world to see that. I don't see China doing that. If they were going to do it, they would have picked a pathogen far more effective than coronavirus, because let's be honest, look at the numbers. You know, this isn't even matching the seasonal flu. You know, I keep hearing all these people talking about, you know, biological weapons, biological weapons. Well, biological weapons tend to be pretty lethal or pretty debilitating. Anthrax is a good example. Anthrax is used as a biological weapon because of its low secondary communicability. You can dust a battlefield with it. Everyone on the battlefield is too sick to fight, and you can win the war. And because of the low secondary communicability, it's contained. You don't spread it into the nearby civilian population, as opposed to something like, for example, an Ebola. And Tom Clancy did that in his book Executive Action. He really looked at that problem where your infected population does the work of spreading the disease for you. And that's something with high secondary communicability. So if we look at coronavirus, its R0 is hovering just slightly above 1. That's not very infective for something that's supposed to be a biological weapon. The vast majority of people are getting it. They're not even showing symptoms. That's a bad thing for a biological weapon to be doing. So I'm not buying this as a biological weapon. It may have eventually intended to be one, but they weren't there yet. Maybe it was a work in progress and somebody dropped a test tube. But this is not, it's not, certainly not ready for use. And no, Mr. Navarro, I don't think China deliberately seeded it around the world. All right, apparently upwards of 100,000 cruise line crew members are still stranded worldwide after more than 2 months at sea, caught on ships since mid-March as the coronavirus crisis shut down sailing. Many aren't being paid, and there have been suicides. That's pretty serious stuff. I understand some of those crew lines are starting to reopen, take bookings, and apparently the bookings are through the roof. You know, people are ready to go on their blue water cruises. All right, let's talk about politics. domestic politics. Nevada Democrat Stephen Horsford admits an affair with a former Harry Reid intern after he was exposed on a podcast called Mistress for Congress. And he's admitted he engaged in a previous relationship outside of my marriage over the course of several years. Well, gee whiz, that sounds like politics as normal. We're going to take a break for more commercials. We'll be back with more news after these stories. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the news here, I'm just noticing on Fox News, Donald Trump is holding some kind of a presser in which he's saying he's still testing negative for coronavirus. Nevertheless, he's been taking hydroxychloroquine for about a week and a half now. And he says there's no negative effects. So he's still out there pushing that. And it may, in fact, be a cure, but they can't make money off of it. So everybody's rushing around. Oh, vaccines, treatments, that's where the big bucks are. Cures, bad business. Cures are bad business. All right, turning to the international news here now. We may be about to see a confrontation in the Caribbean. Iranian state TV has announced at least 5 Iranian-flagged oil tankers are transporting fuel to Venezuela through the Atlantic Ocean and plan to break the American blockade on the Latin American country. Iran has warned that any U.S. attempt at intercepting its fuel tankers would have serious repercussions for the Trump administration ahead of the November elections. I'm not sure what Iran means by that, okay? Except starting another war, I think probably wouldn't look too good to the American voter. State-funded Press TV underscores that Iran is shipping tons of gasoline to Venezuela in defiance of U.S. sanctions on both countries in a symbolic move guaranteed by Tehran's missile prowess. This is some very, very tough talk. Now, both countries have been targeted by U.S. sanctions and various levels of covert military action of late. I think they're talking about that Bay of Pigs version 2.0 that they bollocksed up so badly here. President Trump has taken a personal interest in renewed pressure on Maduro within the past months, reportedly pushing his generals to go forward with a naval blockade of the socialist nation. Mr. President, it's the admirals you would talk to about a naval blockade. Don't mean to tell you your job here, but talk to the admirals here. Iran's foreign ministry has warned again that the United States will itself bear the responsibility for any foolish act that it could take against Venezuela-headed Iranian fuel tankers, saying Washington cannot come in the way of legitimate trade among independent countries. Well, in a just and fair world, yes, that would be true. But unfortunately, the United States has taken the attitude that they alone decide who gets to trade with who on the world. That's what they want. They want the entire world's economy under U.S. control in order to enrich the United States, having bankrupted ourselves in all kinds of things like illegal immigrants. Britain has been warned against coup-mongering in Venezuela after the discovery of an office devoted to the reconstruction of Venezuela in their embassy. And demanding an urgent explanation, Foreign Minister Jorge Ariza lodged a formal complaint with Ambassador Duncan Hill, who said the minister had confirmed the existence of the unit and tried to justify the unjustifiable. We demand that the British government abandon Washington's coup-mongering plans and any destabilizing initiative. We demand respect for our sovereignty and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. The unit, apparently headed by former UK ambassador to Venezuela, John Seville, is believed to be part of plans to rebuild Venezuela and promote British interests after the removal of the democratically elected President Nicolas Maduro and the Bolivarian government, thereby bringing the joys of capitalism to Venezuela. And of course, talk to any of those people living in the streets of America how they feel about capitalism. Over in Korea, all of a sudden observers are noticing that portraits are starting to be removed from the walls, primarily of Kim Jong-un's father and grandfather, reigniting rumors of his death. Now, supposedly he's only been seen once in a photo for which there was no provenance when it was actually taken. We could be in another situation like Francisco Franco, whose death was kept secret for months and months and months till it became a running joke on Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update. Meanwhile, U.S. muscle flexing threatens to open the Arctic front in a new Cold War with Russia. Get the joke there? Arctic front, Cold War. Yuck, 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 yuck. Anyway, the U.S. Navy is on the cusp of conducting confrontational freedom of navigation operations in the Arctic that threaten Russian economic and national security interests. The recent resumption by the U.S. Navy of a Barents Sea patrol represents muscle flexing on the part of Washington and its NATO allies unseen since the end of the Cold War. Now, there's something you need to keep in mind right now. The Russians understand the Arctic. It forms a large part of their national border. They build the world's best icebreakers, some of them nuclear powered. And this is an area in which, once again, the United States is lagging behind. Anyway, 3 American destroyers and a British frigate, accompanied by a supply ship, ventured into the Arctic body of water last week. The reestablishment of the patrol is part of a larger refocusing of attention by the U.S. and NATO on the Arctic, where warming waters and melting ice have created the possibility of faster sea transits between Europe and Asia and access to natural resources which were previously viewed as cost prohibitive due to heavy ice conditions. Look at this. Our war policy is being dictated by human-caused global warming, by the myth, by the joke. The only ships that can sail directly from America to Asia are submarines right now. Al Gore was wrong. The Arctic is not ice-free, and it hasn't been. Now, the natural resources they're talking about, it's been determined there's vast amounts of oil in the Arctic abyssal plains. Maybe part of the reason that we had that rush for deep drilling that led to the Deepwater Horizon disaster is trying to perfect the technology to get that out. India is intensifying its US-backed hybrid war on China. We've had these clashes with China along the line of actual control, its selective embrace of economic nationalism to poach foreign companies from the People's Republic, or its forthcoming leadership of the World Health Assembly, where it might very well take Washington's side in demanding an investigation into Beijing's response to World War C. India is indisputably intensifying its American-backed hybrid war on China as a sign of loyalty to its new ally. In other words, BRICS is now broken. Now, as far as bringing their manufacturing back home from China, a lot of countries are doing that. Japan's doing it. The U.S. is trying to do it. Because if there's one thing this whole coronavirus has taught us is supply chains are vulnerable. We found ourselves dependent on countries that we're not exactly 100% friendly with for things that we desperately needed. So there's a lesson to be learned there that globalism is not all upside. There is a downside to it as well, and we got to live it. All right, over in Kentucky, a U.S. Army facility announced earlier this week it had destroyed the last of the United States 8-inch artillery shells containing sarin. It is one of 2 such plants scheduled to destroy the entire stock of U.S. chemical weapons before 2024. Well, that's definitely a good thing. On Tuesday, the Bluegrass Chemical Agent Destruction Pilot Plant announced it had completed the project that began in January of destroying the U.S. Army stock of GB, the NATO designation for the sarin gas poisonous nerve agent. We are one step closer to destruction of the chemical weapons stockpile in Kentucky and fulfilling our pledge to the nation and an international arms control treaty. Okay, the performance of the facility has been incredible, and that's aside from doing this work safely during a pandemic. We're all proud of the team. Well, I certainly hope that was all the weapons. But, you know, the United States government has a bad habit of reneging on these deals or cheating. Supposedly, we were going to destroy all of our anthrax several years ago. That didn't happen. And here's one that's got the rumor mills kicking all over the world right now. China's ambassador to Israel has been found dead inside his home near Tel Aviv as of yesterday morning. The 57-year-old ambassador, Du Wei, had only assumed his post in February of this year in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, due to which he had entered a 2-week mandatory self-quarantine upon his arrival. He'd previously been China's envoy to Ukraine and is survived by his wife and son, who were not yet in the country. So we'll see where that goes, but the rumor mills are, you know, was it an assassination? Did they not like this guy? It's very unusual for an ambassador to die on the job. Generally, they try and get healthy people to do these. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. And actually, before we do that, they're still going on about how President Trump has taken hydroxychloroquine every day for a week and a half. Why are they pounding on this? Anyway, there's going to be a big debate there between the big money pharmaceutical companies and those who are saying, look, whatever works. All right, so getting back to the economic news. First of all, it was a great day on the stock market. The Dow ended 911 points up. So they're all happy over there on Wall Street, except for Bayer. Bayer's stock has crashed after the Monsanto cancer verdict is upheld by a judge. Analysts are estimating $800 billion with a B in future liabilities. And, you know, Bayer made a bad choice in buying Monsanto. They didn't look at the true liabilities. And now they're stuck. 57 billion euros of market cap down the drain later. Now their headache is taking on epic proportions. Another aspect of the coronavirus is we're looking at a tidal wave of delinquent mortgages that will surpass the Great Recession of back in 2008, 2009. 4 million homeowners are in some kind of mortgage forbearance plan, representing 7.54% of all mortgages. Delinquencies are set to eclipse the Great Recession, which peaked at 10%. According to a new report from UK-based forecasting from Oxford Economics, 15% of homeowners will fall behind on their monthly mortgage payments in a tidal wave of delinquencies. And Pelosi wants to give taxpayer money to illegal immigrants. Just want to put that in perspective for you. Anyway, stimulus legislation signed by President Trump allows any borrower with a federally backed mortgage to request forbearance for up to 12 months, meaning the homeowner can skip or make reduced payments during that time. You're not off the hook, though. You got to make those payments somewhere else down the road. Given the risk mortgage companies are facing right now, many lenders have imposed more stringent requirements for loan applications. The uncertainty in the mortgage market has contributed to a significant tightening of lending standards, which may persist even once a recovery is underway. And by the way, this is also affecting the formula under which your credit score is being calculated. So if your credit score takes a dip downward, it's nothing that you did. It's just everybody is reevaluating risk right now. So over at realinvestmentadvice.com, Lance Roberts is asking, is it possible the Fed overreacted to a natural disaster? There are two different types of recessionary events that occur throughout history. The first is a business cycle recession, which happens with some regularity as excesses build up in the economy. These cycles generally take 12 to 18 months to complete as those excesses are reversed. Then there are event-driven recessions that occur from natural disasters, of which COVID-19 is clearly one. These are much shorter in duration and can be sector-specific. One such event was the Japanese earthquake of 2011, which led to a temporary manufacturing recession. So, as with any illness, the application of the wrong medication can lead to unintended consequences. They're wondering if the Federal Reserve may have overreacted to COVID-19 and is causing, the cure could be worse than the disease here. Okay, the Commerce Department's decision to tighten restrictions on Huawei announced a few days ago are already throwing a wrench in Huawei's supply chain, a sign that the U.S. is no longer playing around and is going all in on bringing the Chinese telecom giant with strong links to the PLA to its knees. Now, that's not why the United States is going after Huawei. They're going after Huawei because Huawei is a competitor to American companies. And even worse, Huawei's telecoms are encrypted with encryption systems that the NSA is not privy to. And that's why the United States wants them to go away. We have a divine right to eavesdrop on the communications of the world here. And we have a divine right to sell our products, even though they're more expensive and don't work as well. So apparently the Trump administration blocked a shipment of American-made semiconductors that was headed to Huawei, eliciting a flurry of retaliatory threats as Beijing, via the mainland press, promised to target Boeing, Apple, and Qualcomm with endless investigations. Now, despite the seeming escalation in the U.S. trade and tech wars with China, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett told CNBC that the Phase 1 trade deal still appears to be intact. Maybe a little bit optimistic on that one. Despite years of aggressive intellectual technology theft coordinated by the Chinese government, Huawei remains surprisingly dependent on products and technology produced by American companies. It may undermine the claim that they've been stealing the technology all along. But the Chinese government could basically declare nuclear war on U.S. companies, including Apple, with relentless investigations as retaliation for Trump's new Huawei sanctions. Meanwhile, 41% of Americans say they won't buy products made in China. On the other side, 35% of Chinese say they won't buy American-made goods. So trade war does go on in one form at the grassroots level. Facebook has just bought Giphy for $400 million. The tech giant, meaning Facebook, pledges to banish all hateful memes. Now, apparently, Giphy is a popular platform for animated images, which are used for emoticons and various other decorations for messages. And apparently Facebook has decided that some of those images are not appropriate for the poor sensibilities of you ordinary human beings. So apparently, back with the Washington Post for $250 million, you got a bargain here because they're spending $400 million for Giphy. The deal comes as the Trump administration Department of Justice cranks up antitrust scrutiny of tech titans. They're starting to talk about antitrust actions against, well, like Google. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break, coming up on the last segment of the first hour, and we're going to go ahead and start opening up the phone lines for hour number 2. So we'll be right back after these few words. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of hour number 1, and Fox News is still going on about the president taking daily doses of hydroxychloroquine, and they're emphasizing that he's doing it as a preventative because of the members of the White House staff who have tested positive for COVID-19. Okay, let's get some last bits of news done here, and then we're going to go to the phone lines at the top of the hour, and I can see we've already got at least one caller waiting on the line patiently. After the Ahmaud Arbery killing, the push for a Georgia hate crime law sees a newfound resurgence. I have a real issue with the idea of a hate crime law because supposedly the crime, in this case killing somebody, should be carrying a penalty that in theory should act as a deterrent. What is the whole point of saying, well, it's a hate crime? It's a way of making this murder somehow more significant than that murder, or this assault more important than that assault. Murder is murder. Assault is assault. Robbery is robbery. Rape is rape. I don't think we need to stratify them by saying, well, this was the result of a hate crime. I have to be honest, I think it's silly. I think it's really silly. Anyway, there's a story that's been floating around for a while. It's about some hackers who broke into the computer files of a celebrity lawyer, and they're going to reveal dirty laundry on Donald Trump unless they get their ransom of $42 million. And apparently, to prove that they've got the goods, they have released some information about Lady Gaga. People need to understand that if you've got sensitive information on your computer, air gap it. Have one machine that talks to the outside world and have one machine that is disconnected from the outside world on which you keep your secret stuff. And use strong encryption. Write your own, matter of fact. We've been talking about how the sun has gone into a lockdown, and reduced activity on the solar surface has sparked fears of a mini ice age, like we've already had one before, the little ice age. And of course, this will also impact food deliveries and food growing. And We've got the season's first tropical storm ahead of schedule, is heading in for the Carolinas right now. Meanwhile, a strong and shallow 6.4 earthquake hit Nevada. Aftershocks have been reported. Apparently 45,000 people felt the weak shaking. A little bit of good news from planet Mars. NASA's InSight rover's Mole is finally making progress burrowing into the ground on Mars after months struggling to penetrate beyond the surface. And there's a lot of stuff up in the sky here. There's Comet Swan. It's tinted slightly green. It's got an 11 million mile long tail, and it's flying past Earth on its way to the sun. You don't need a telescope to see it. Comet Atlas, unfortunately, has torn itself apart and is not going to be the spectacle that people were kind of hoping it would be. The James Webb Space Telescope is stowed and primed for testing. It's a complicated design, and I wish them a lot of luck with that. All right, we've got to take a break for station identification. We've got callers waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, welcome to our show, hour number 2, and we're going to start taking phone calls, starting with Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Good day to you, Michael. Aloha to you. First off, I want to get this off my chest. Hussein Obama, he's been lying and spying on Flynn for 4 months before Trump became the president. He was already, because he had fired Flynn, Michael. Did you know that Flynn used to work for Obama?
Yes.
And he had a real problem, and he was spying and lying on Trump's administration from day one. Obama is guilty, but nothing's going to happen because they're going to drop all this because he was an ex-president, even though the guy's a criminal, and the nonsense he's allowed to happen with race relations and everything. They're trying to blame Trump. It actually was Obama that caused a lot of these racial problems and all that. So, like I say, Hussein Obama, Dumbo, he's the one that actually started a lot of this hatred that this country's facing right now. So, anyway, I just wanted to get that off my chest, Michael. And
okay.
Also, I want to say this. The other day, somebody called me out, and I didn't appreciate it. But you know what? It is what it is. That's why you have a talk show. And this guy here is talking about, we know who's controlling the banks and all that, so I don't even have to mention that. We know who's basically controlling Hollywood and who's controlling the media, for that matter. But, to have a guy, like he's throwing my name out, I'm going to start calling his name out, but I don't want to do that right now. But,
I would prefer that you not do that.
Yeah, well, he does it all the time to me. But you know what, Michael, I'll let it slide because, it's like this. It is what it is. The truth will come out. And by the way, Michael, have you had a chance to see the History Channel, the frontiersmen who made America?
Yes, I have. I like that show.
It's fantastic. And if you've been watching it, you'll see what Andrew Jackson was all about. I mean, to what he had to do. I mean, unfortunately, this is the way it was. That's just. Jackson had to be as brutal as he had to be to tame the West and become the president. It's not an easy thing, especially in those days. Jackson didn't take crap from anybody. You wouldn't have these all this political correct stuff now, Michael. But Andrew Jackson was a man.
Yes.
And Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett, and the History Channel like spinning how bad Andrew Jackson was, and who was the other guy? James Polk, and
yes,
all these, presidents. And, let's manifest destiny from sea to shining sea, Michael. That's what it was all about.
What's going on here is, unfortunately, History Channel is trying to judge the actions of these people out of the context of their lives. Now, it's true, if Andrew Jackson was alive today and behaved the way that he did, we would all look at him and say, this is wrong. But you've got to look at what Andrew Jackson, for that matter, Thomas Jefferson. I mean, they're on his case for owning slaves. Back then, that was the norm. That's the context of his life. And it's not fair to anybody in history to try and judge their lives out of the context, that they lived in. But the PC people like to do that by saying, oh, see, the people that you grew up worshiping, they're really bad people. So you should be worshiping the new people like Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi and all these others. It's a way of trying to erase and destroy our history. Now, I personally don't agree with everything that Andrew Jackson did, except for ending the bank. Um, Thomas Jefferson was one of my personal heroes, so has Ben Franklin. But you can't really judge their lives without judging the context in which they lived. What was the norm? What was the societal norm? And you said it yourself. The reality is that, Andrew Jackson and people like him, in order to basically win the continent, they had to be very brutal to match the brutality that was being visited on them by many of the indigenous tribes.
Absolutely. There it is, Michael. And, like Thomas Jefferson, look what he did. He was fantastic. He's the one to send Lewis and Clark on their expedition. It was Jefferson who opened the West. And all you're hearing from a lot of people are all these old white guys are real monsters and this and that. No, there were great leaders who saw a destiny for this to be the greatest country on earth. And to put these people down it's absolutely absurd, man. And that's what's ruling the day today, Michael. We got all these liberal licky kissy touchy feelies, basically controlling our media and all that. And I was going to ask you, Michael, what did you think about this? The other day, the guy in the one state when Chris Christie was calling out Josephine, what was her name? Ozaki Behar, and Whoopi Goldberg. That's not even her real name, Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah.
Both of those women were raised basically Catholic, Christian.
Yes.
Whoopi Goldberg and Behar were Christians, but they're going around acting like they're a bunch of schmucks, schwatzes, or whatever you want to call them. What do you call it? Yentas.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. They're acting like they're yentas, but actually they were raised in the Christian faith. What hypocritical nonsense. And you got that Behar running her big blabbermouth like Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz and all these other yentas. It's unbelievable. And the lies that the media is allowing to be perpetrated. It's just phenomenal, Michael. It really is.
Yes.
Like I said, Obama, Hussein, he got away with filthy murder through the media, but Trump does one little thing, and it's like, oh, man, they're attacking Trump every day, unrelenting, Michael. It's absurd. It's absurd. Commander-in-Chief, and Trump is, let's not kid ourselves. Even James Wood today came out, Michael. Did you see what James Wood said about Trump today?
No, I didn't.
Well, it's all over the news, and he's one of the smartest men in the United States. His IQ, I believe, is 190 or something, 180. Something nuts.
Yep.
James Wood, actor. He was really praising Trump big time today. All over the media, all the networks were carrying it. James Wood is really saying that Trump he hasn't ever in his lifetime seen a president love this country more than Donald Trump. So accolades James Wood. Very super intelligent man.
Yes.
So I just throw that out there. That's all over the news today. So I was really happy to see that. And that's what Trump needs more of. He needs people like that talking good about him, not every day unrelenting like this Matt Sludge, this schmuck freak show here in Florida here that's always lying about Trump. I mean, this guy 1 week liked Trump, and then 3 weeks later he hates Trump. Then he'll like him for a week, and then it'll be a month before he likes him. This guy Sludge is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But, yeah, those out there today with James Wood, Michael. So I was hoping you read up on that. That's very interesting. So that's all I basically got, and thank you for taking my call, and have a wonderful day. And like I said, Michael, the one guy calls me out. I don't call him by his name much, but I tell you, Chris Christie really hammered Behar good. I wonder if he's thinking about it, a fellow New Jerseyan. Chris Christie was really out there the other day hammering that Behar. Got her good.
Yeah.
It's kind of unbelievable to me. Chris Christie's actually speaking up, showing some fortitude and cojones, whatever you want to call it. So, anyway, Michael, thank you for taking my call, and have a great day.
All right, same to you, and we're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, Mike? Mike, there's two things. One is about still what just last week, Friday, one of your callers, guy, I won't mention his name, but he's, let's put it like this. His state borders New York.
Okay.
He was talking again about the mask.
Uh-oh.
Faces, all this.
He's waiting in the call list right now. This is going to get interesting.
First of all, okay, I'd ask this guy to check out my YouTube channel where I show how I put on my mask, okay, and what I use, the ingredients I use. The other thing is the mask is no good for you. More and more doctors even are coming out and saying it. You're breathing in your own germs, breathing in your own carbon dioxide. And as far as new cases go, most of these cases are symptomless cases. It's like any virus. You know, you get hit by a lot of different viruses, but your body normally fights them off, and a lot of times you don't even know you have them. I wouldn't be surprised half the country already has it, but they're making this look like new cases. They're not new cases, okay? It means people are fighting this thing off. Thank God. We've got immune systems in this country good enough to fight these things off. The biggest casualties are poor people in the nursing homes. By the way, I made another YouTube, video about that, where I said, Cuomo should be charged with murder for letting infected people into these nursing homes, knowing they were infected. And this is, you don't even, these are people with some of the worst possible health in these nursing homes, okay? They're basically on the verge of death. I mean, they're really in bad shape. They got all kinds of maladies. They're old and all feeble and all kinds of maladies. A common cold brought in there. If you bring in a cold, it can cause a havoc. So what do you think with a virus like this, or flu, or anything like that? The other thing I want to bring out is what we were talking about, Andrew Jackson. Look, I don't kid myself about Jackson, okay? All right, he did one good thing about the banks. Other than that, the man was a dirtbag, okay? He did horrible things to the Native Americans, who are Americans, Mike. They are the original Americans in this country, okay? They have right to be respected, and we have the right to, understand history about the Trail of Tears, who was done to the Cherokee, the Cherokee were, they were adopting to white man's ways. They were farming. They had villages. They had, they really should have been citizens at the time, okay? And yet, this dirtbag did what he did against the orders of the Supreme Court, by the way, okay? And there's no excuse for that, even back then. Not that long ago. I'm not talking about ancient times. He's a dirtbag. I'm sorry, he was evil. He's evil to the max. Okay, one of the worst presidents this country has ever had. We've had some bad ones too. All right, and and other than that, I'm waiting for the guy from New Jersey to answer me. Maybe he can answer me on Jackson too. Maybe he also admires Andrew Jackson. I don't. I know Stephen K. Bannon loves the guy, and these idiots on Breitbart love him, and Trump loves him. But I say he's a dirtbag. Okay, Mike, that's about it.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot here. And our next caller is that unnamed guy from New Jersey. So welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, we all know who it is. Dustin from New Jersey.
Yes.
And I like Mark. I like Tom. I have no ill will for them. But they're right on, a lot of stuff. But they're wrong on certain things. Tom, Mark, with the Indian... Go watch Open Range, and also watch, there was another one with, what was his name? He was in a lot of Westerns. Basically, it was about, they gave smallpox blankets. They were I forgot, it was a movie about they were bringing Chinese women they got to protect, and they ran into this two guys who were bringing smallpox to Indians,
Yes.
blankets,
Yes.
Yeah, I forgot what was, the name of it, but it was a good movie.
That was a deliberate policy by the U.S. government. Is they handed out these blankets that had been used to care for smallpox victims in the U.S. military, and they just said, "Here, have some blankets." And of course, kicked off. It was biological warfare. There's no other way to describe it, and it absolutely did decimate the Native Americans who were foolish enough to accept those blankets.
Oh, Robert Duvall, Mike, Broken Trail. It was a mini-series. I think it was on AMC. It was good. It was actually pretty good, but for all you action fans, you ain't going to like it. It's a drama. You got to sit down and watch it, But it was good. Broken Trail, Open Range, those movies are good. But, Mike, I want to talk about, look, I'm not saying this virus is like the Spanish flu. But, I went to Walmart the other day. I saw a group of people that were wearing no face mask, just a splash protector, but with no face mask. That's not going to do anything.
No.
Like a plastic shield's not going to do anything, And like Mike, you said earlier, the numbers might not be that accurate or at But I mean, it is a real virus. You got to take that into account. And like, we don't know what our own immune systems do.
Yes.
I don't know what my immune system can handle. Mark and Tom doesn't neither. So we don't know what's going on. And then there's a second thing going on in China, and obviously, since global trade and global communication and global travel is going around the world, these things are going to spread. Mike, what's it going to look like in November again? I mean, holy crap! Are we going to be back to lockdown?
I'm one of those hoping that by November things are going to be getting pretty much back to normal here. Of course, all those people predicting a second wave are saying that, yeah, by November we'll be back to more lockdowns. And of course, the Democrats would love that because they're going to blame it on Donald Trump.
Well, I was just thinking, right, when I hear that word lockdown, I hear you think we're only locked down for like Jesus, Iraq, they put sanctions on them. They're locked down for years, basically, right? Like you can't not locked down in your home, but locked down into just dealing with outside your country and getting things like toilet paper or paper towels like we had a hard time getting, right? And certain meats. Imagine that with the sanctions. Anybody think about that? Like, sanctions with Iran or Venezuela and stuff, you think it's bad here, even with the lockdown for 2 or 3 months. My God, Mike, I don't even know what it's like being in Venezuela or Iran or Iraq during the Iraq War. How much of that crap they had to deal with from our American interests. As Tom said it, Mike, as a manifest destiny. That's what that is, right? You said British national interest, right? Like that's empire. That's subjugating the population, right? Like India, China, Scotland, Ireland, right? Their own people, Britain and the UK, that's subjugation. So lockdown, you people think this lockdown is bad because you got to wear a mask or stay home for 2 months. Imagine look at how many people died in Iraq, the children, with Madeleine Albright.
Yes.
She said it, come on, man. Look what our own government has done around the world, and the British. And you notice the Australians are going along with this whole biological weapons thing. Well, Mike, do you still hear that? One group says there's a biological weapon, the other says it's a natural. It's like they're playing both sides of the they're playing both sides. It's a good cop, bad cop routine. Trying to think what else I can say. I'm aggravated, Mike. I'm like, why can't we just leave countries alone? Like, lift the sanctions. I thought Trump wants to isn't bringing economic prosperity to everybody a better thing for everybody? Like, why? It's not going to work by trying to grab everything for yourself at this point in time. It's a global economy. So you would think we'd lift all the sanctions. Iran has a lot to offer the world. So does Venezuela. There's a lot of entrepreneurship in all of our countries. After this virus you would think we just all would trade with each other. But see, Mike, at the end of the day, it's going to be about who's on top.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Because the perception of wealth is relative. We could all be multimillionaires, and there'd still be somebody who say, I'm a billionaire, therefore I'm better than you are. And it's a very primitive behavior. It's something I wish we'd left behind in our evolution from our forebears. But unfortunately, we still carry much of the beast with us.
And before I get off the phone, because I'm in wishy-washy on everywhere and all, but Mike, did you see that thing with Moderna Pharmaceuticals? The guy that Slowy guy, was it the coronavirus czar?
Yeah.
He made a lot of money. Did you see that? Holy crap. He had all those stocks, $134-something thousand or 1,000 stocks. He made all that money, and none of us who call in has it. That tells you something. Mike?
Yes.
Have a good night.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. And we're going to go ahead and start with Jim in Montana. Jim, I'm going to have to take you through the next commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, Dustin. Sorry, man. Go sell that stuff to someone else. But we don't want to be Iran. We don't want to be Venezuela. We don't want to be China, as a matter of fact. That's why we are fighting against this shutdown, lockdown BS. Hey, the other day, Colorado
Okay, Jim, I got to put you on hold.
numbers.
Jim, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Jim in Montana. And Jim, could you just sort of pick up where you left off?
Colorado came out the other day and reduced their numbers, their death toll numbers, and said, well, we're not going to go by the CDC standard. They wanted, so they readjusted, however, and reduced it down. That's probably a minute, standard. I mean, for the nation, for the numbers, I think it's way exaggerated. This thing's a joke. The PCR tests are a joke. I mean, come on. Yeah, Dustin, the math thing has been debunked. And like Tom said, more and more doctors are coming out. It's like, this is a joke, and we know our immune systems. Those of us who really researched it. What do you know about molecular, cellular health structure and all that stuff? I'm thinking not much. Is what I'm thinking, Dustin. A lot of people know that if you just keep your pH and acidic level at the right balance, you can't get sick from a lot of things that way too. You
mean alkaline?
For those of you that, what's that?
I mean, you keep your pH in the alkaline, you're going to be healthier.
Right, exactly. Okay. Well, yeah, right. There's a balance. There's a perfect balance there. If you keep that, free radical cells can't develop in your body. But yeah, anyway, for those of you that are susceptible to sickness and stuff anyway, take precautions or whatever, but for the rest of us that have good immune systems, whatever, you're fine. You're fine. I talked about colloidal silver, zinc, vitamin C with that. You're fine. It's not worth the irrefutable, the damage that it's going to do to the country, the small businesses of this country. They are trying to break us, people. And yes, no, this is not the last wave. This is not their last effort. It's obvious. Bill Gates, all of them, they're globalists. They're out to make their plans come into play. It's happening. Alex Jones had a show yesterday. I really suggest everybody take a look at that show and find out what they're really putting into these vaccinations that can be put out. They're doing test trials. Bill Gates wants to do test trials in India on this, and he came out and said in this article that they are sterilizing everyone with these vaccinations.
They've been doing it before.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I really suggest people tune into that show, the InfoWars show they had yesterday. If you can get to it on YouTube, they'll get to it somehow. But this is a little hard. They're organized. They're all in this together. Rockefellers. Look who's funding all these operations. So yep. It's happening. It's happening. This is it. They're trying to bring us to our knees. They're trying to bring us to one world government. That's all I got to say. All right, have a good day, Michael. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Paul in New Jersey. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Michael, think of when the whites settled America. How many more Indians would be alive today if those white people wore masks? You got to wonder.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, the Europeans brought so many diseases that the people in the Americas were just not ready for. I mean, they decimated the Hawaiian population. The whaling ships brought in measles, and that's why there was this big push to bring laborers over from China and Japan and Korea during the heyday of the plantations, because the indigenous Hawaiian population had been all but wiped out.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up a story about smallpox spread because I think it was during the French and Indian Wars up in upstate New York on Lake George, there was a fort called Fort William Henry.
Yes.
And the French general Montcalm was working with some Indians, right? I forget which tribe offhand. As they would always get Indians as mercenaries or helpers to conquer, or fight for them. And so anyway, they conquer the British fort, and Montcalm basically says, "Yeah, let the Indians do what they want with the looting." And so the Indians dug up the dead bodies of the British and the settlers who were hunkered down there. And they dug up the bodies and they took the blankets from the dead bodies. Well, those blankets happened to have had smallpox on them. So those Indians brought those infected blankets back and spread smallpox among their own people. And remember, once you get smallpox, and let's say it's the wintertime and you're in confined places, smallpox can be spread from prolonged exposure by airborne aerosols like tuberculosis can.
Okay, well, Paul, I'm
so-
going to have to put you on hold. I got to put you on
Sure.
hold. We can take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Paul in New Jersey. And for those who are interested, the story of Montcalm versus Monroe and Fort William Henry forms the backstory for James Fenimore Cooper's The Last of the Mohicans, which is a good read and an even better movie. So, Paul, you want to pick it up where you left off?
Yeah, Alan Eckert also wrote some good books on it. The Wilderness Wars, The Conquerors. He wrote a whole series concerning that era of time, and I recommend them highly. But why I called was because I also wanted to defend Andrew Jackson.
Yes.
And the reason why, people have to understand, a lot of these leaders who go on to be dictators later in life, when they were young, they were heavily traumatized and basically PTSD at a young age. Andrew Jackson was basically, his father died, I think, when he was a child. His mother dies later. His brother dying in a fight with fighting against the British. And then, even as a lad, he was struck by the sword of a British soldier, or actually, I think, an officer with a sword on his face, and he carried that scar. That is the scar across Andrew Jackson's face that he wore his whole life. He ended up suffering smallpox himself and survived it. I think, by the way, that probably led to his sterility.
Okay.
Why he was childless. Likewise, why Washington, too, I think, was rendered sterile because of smallpox. And then he went on to later on life actually adopted an Indian as a child, as a son.
Washington or Jackson?
No, Jackson.
Okay.
Yeah, and lastly, I just want to say, when it comes to these traumatized people, same thing with Hitler. Hitler was beaten severely by his father through the course of his childhood. Same with Joseph Stalin. Same with Saddam Hussein. So you see that it's a pattern of many of these tyrants, and their personal anger is because of the suffering they endured as children. Anyway, I could go on and on. I could have mentioned the Tuscarora Indians in North Carolina, but I'll not bore the audience. But thank you, Michael.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Bruce in Texas. Hello, Bruce. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey,
Bruce, there you are.
we always need to remember. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Okay, great. Kind of mumbled there for a second. Smedley Butler, I'm a former Marine, and we need to remember what he wrote about our foreign adventures and what he was actually fighting for. And he didn't discover that until very late in life. Okay? I hate to pick on your callers. I can name it by name, but, the left uses buzzwords like Nazi, 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 and the far right does the same thing with the commie. Okay, and if you notice that gets thrown out, that's a crutch for a weak argument. Second of all, because not all governments are the same, even if they wear or were the medallions of a certain movement back in the past. And our understanding of them is colored by propaganda, movies, and textbooks that are written towards to push an agenda. As far as Andrew Jackson is concerned, I'm a Texican and I'm also 1/4 Apache. And I've been studying the Texas history, the part of history that you don't hear about. Okay, Sam Houston was a Mason, and so was Jackson. And Jackson sent Houston to Texas to bamboozle the volunteers here and to also play up the Native Americans and to fool them into thinking they're going to fight for their own independence and they're going to stay that way. And so he came to Texas and he played up the Indian thing. I think he married an Indian, if I'm not mistaken, for a little while. Then he left her. He made friends with the tribes, and he came to Texas and chummied up with the volunteers. And then he left his political rivals out on the vine there at the Alamo to be slaughtered. And then he was helped out by Andrew Jackson's secret army that was on the other side of the Sabine River in Louisiana to lure Santa Anna's army up over there so they could be decimated. And then he let Santa Anna, who was also a Mason, let him go. Okay, and then when Texas achieves independence, it's not shortly thereafter that he pushes through the joining the Union. And then when the Civil War breaks out, he refused to side with the Confederates, not because of what the narrative is that, oh, he was against slavery, because when he fought with Texas against Mexico, the Texicans were slave owners. So why would he do that? It's all empire, period. It's all corporatism, and it's all fighting for people who benefit that are in New York and elsewhere, the investor class, okay? Now, I'm sick of hearing about this arguing on behalf of the investor class. Let's be honest. That's all I'm saying. That's all I got.
All right. Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting on back to the news here, as I mentioned a little bit before, Tropical Storm Arthur is formed before the start of the official Atlantic hurricane season. And so it's an early storm, and it should be hitting the outer banks of the Carolinas right about now as we speak. And so we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully it won't cause that much damage here. Now, the Space Force has launched their X-37B robotic spaceplane back into orbit. This is the 6th flight, and they've actually revealed some mission details. For one thing, it's not expected to return back to Earth until 2022. Now, supposedly it's carrying scientific experiments, but one of the experiments it's taking will use solar panels to generate electricity and then beam the electricity down to Earth in the form of microwaves. Now, this would be of practical application if you need a source of electricity for something that is in the Earth's shadow on the night side of the planet. I'm not sure how big the solar panels are. This may just be a test platform, but it would take a lot of solar panels to come up with enough electricity to really be of use to, shall we say, a military unit in the field. My concern, of course, is that such a device would also be usable as a weapon, where you could use the solar panels or a nuclear reactor to generate the microwaves and then zorch something on the ground with microwaves. And I would be very surprised if our military wasn't already thinking about that sort of an application for this robotic spacecraft. All righty, now then, getting on back to some other news here. As I mentioned earlier in the show, the Dow closes up more than 900 points. On the very same day, the Atlanta Federal Reserve estimates the second quarter real gross domestic product at minus 42.8%. Meanwhile, 100,000 plus small businesses have closed forever. This is the price of the lockdown, which now we're beginning to find out may have been the result of one of the worst computer errors in history. Okay. One of our callers mentioned this. The Trump vaccine czar makes $3.4 million windfall as firm reports progress on the coronavirus shot and stock soars. All righty. All righty, let's see. China has finally agreed for a probe into the COVID-19 origin. So we're going to get a chance to look at that. And they've been making a big deal about this story. The gunman who fatally shot 3 sailors at Naval Air Station Pensacola last December apparently was in contact with Al-Qaeda. It took them this long to break the encryption on his cell phone, and they found messages. Okay. More coronavirus. All righty. Well, let's talk a little bit about history. One of our callers was mentioning the derisive comment about, a bunch of old white guys, that the founding fathers. But you need to understand that it was only recently when younger people started attaining these positions of leadership. And in many cases, people like Andrew Jackson, or for that matter, Abraham Lincoln, their portraits weren't painted until they were already toward the end of their lives. And that's why they all look like old people. Ben Franklin didn't look like the $100 bill Ben Franklin when he was first starting his publishing empire, or when he realized that lightning is just static electricity, or invented the Franklin stove or bifocal glasses. He was a young man. But back then, you weren't, you didn't have paintings made of you until you were toward the end of your life and they wanted to remember what you were going to look like. Death masks were very popular back then, where they would make a casting of your face right after you passed away to remember who you were. A lot of it has to do with context that I was saying before. It's real easy for us to sit here in the 21st century and say, oh, what they did was bad, but we don't know the context they were living in. And I think the story about Montcalm and Monroe at Fort William Henry is a good example, because that caller who called in, he said the Native Americans basically broke the truce. And that's even, revealed in James Fenimore Cooper's book and in the subsequent movies. The one with Daniel Day-Lewis, I really love, mostly because I'm a black powder freak. But it was a case of Monroe surrendered the fort. Montcalm was going to just let him go, march away in accord with the rules of war and the wishes of the French monarch. It was the Native Americans who broke the truce and attacked. Well, when you're dealing with people like that, you have to meet force with force. And a lot of times when you hear stories about, Native Americans and the American settlers not getting along together, there was guilt on both sides. Now, I know there were atrocities like Sand Creek. There was no excuse for that. By the way, the guy who led that raid on Sand Creek, just killing all those, old men, women, and children, because all the warriors were out someplace else, and they just swooped on down, wiped them out there. The guy who led that was a Methodist minister. All right, we're going to go ahead and take another phone call. Fred in Michigan, hello. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Fred, are you there? Fred going once? Twice?
I am here.
Oh, you are there. Okay, I can hear you now. You're on the air. You're on the air.
Okay. Are you familiar with the name Del Bigtree, the high wire with Del Bigtree?
No, I am not. It doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, well, Del Bigtree, I heard this on Chris Hinckley's cast. He actually produced the documentary entitled Vaxxed.
Oh, yes, of course.
Vaxxed. And no one's been focusing on this. I think it's super critical that we review. So I have a review from Tex Mars regarding Vaxxed, and I'm going to read an excerpt here.
Okay.
In 2013,
I bought several copies and gave them away.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Well, now, okay, so Del Bigtree has a sequel now, Vaxxed 2, and I'm thinking perhaps RFK Jr. Will be prominently featured in Vaxxed 2 because of his successes, that is RFK Jr.'s successes in prosecuting the CDC and NIH for failure to disclose the evidentiary proof of absolutely no safety and efficacy for the inoculation program. and then even lying about the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, which according to Kevin Barry,
Yes.
and this again I heard on Chris Hinckley's cast, Kevin Barry went into the archives of NIH at Johns Hopkins, I guess it was 2017, and he discovered pathology reports, 9 to 10,000 pathology reports in which the pneumococcus pneumonia bacterium was recovered from the lung tissue. And the significance of that is from January through June 1918, American GIs were given 3 doses of the pneumococcus pneumonia bacterium, which then they all became vectors of disease transmission during W1. And so it wasn't flu, it was the pneumococcus pneumonia bacterium with which they had been inoculated, and it was proved by those autopsy tissue data in which they actually recovered it from the lung tissue of the and it was Fort Riley, Kansas.
Yes,
Fort Riley, Kansas.
Camp Funston.
Okay, so here we have scientist Dr. William Thompson confessing that the CDC had omitted crucial data in their final report that proved a causal relationship between MMR vaccine and autism. Over several months, Dr. Hooker, this is the biologist, Dr. Brian Hooker at CDC, senior scientist, with whom Dr. William Thompson provided this data from the final report. I think it was called the Simpsonwood report, as I recall. Okay, so confidential data destroyed by colleagues at the CDC. And then they enlist Dr. Andrew Wakefield, the British gastroenterologist. Yeah, so you know all about this then. And so this is most alarming to me that we are being told that Corona COVID is a global or a galactic virus boogeyman that's going to take out mankind, when, as you know, those doctors in Bakersfield on the 22nd of April, and if people haven't heard the press conference, they can still, I'm sure, go to KERO, ABC 23, KERO 23, ABC.com. They should still have the press conference of 68 minutes in which these ER doctors describe the IgG, the immunoglobulin G, and IgM antibody response mechanism of our bodies, and how immensely powerful it is in its performance. All we need to do is have close proximal contact with people who are infected, which means no social distancing. We go into the stores without masks, and our bodies immediately respond spontaneously to any of the contact. And by the way, the masks are essentially ineffective.
Hey, Fred, I got to put you on hold. Fred, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these commercials. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program today. Here we're talking with Fred in Michigan. And Fred, we know that we were lied to about what happened in 1918, 1919. For one thing, they called it the Spanish flu, and it had absolutely nothing to do with Spain.
Well, yeah, and they, Gates and Fauci and all, they want to cite the 50 to 100 million pandemic, and they still refer to it as a Spanish flu. But Kevin Barry, whom I'd never heard of, and he got his article published at Health Impact News in 2018. That's all I know. Chris elucidated this, but didn't give the exact citation. But anyway, this guy goes in and discovers all this data. But when I consider who is really behind all this and why. People have asked that question. And, Israel keeps popping up. They keep claiming that they're going to have, the life-saving global vaccine in a few months. Okay. And then when I check out Tex Mars's Holy Serpent of the Jews and Andrew Carrington Hitchcock's Synagogue of Satan, Mike, they're full of bold proclamations from preeminent rabbis and authors like Samuel Roth in 1934, in which he cites in his book Jews Must Live, that their genius for evil leadership empowers them to exploit the hard work and good nature of all of mankind, so that they can go about their global conquest endeavor, which is a core central doctrine in their Talmud and Kabbalah, which is global conquest. And they say, and another guy who writes, "You Gentiles," a guy by the name of Stephen Weiss in 1924, I think it was, he says that they will continue to destroy until there are no Gentiles left on the planet, at which time they will then hold all the property in their hands as they are destined to do, they say.
All right. Well, listen, I hate to cut you off here, but we've got one more caller I'm going to try and squeeze in before the end of the program. Thank you for the call, Fred. Dan in Washington, real quick, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I got a lot to say too quick, but what I usually say when we get attacked, American history, I would just bring up the fact that the Zionists in Israel, they offer the Palestinians no reservation anymore. Their plan is to take out any reservation for the Palestinians. So there's a lot of hypocrisy between a lot of these people in media, pointing out how bad Andrew Jackson and stuff was when they support Zionism today.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we can't do anything about what happened with Andrew Jackson, but there is injustice happening right in front of our eyes that we should not be blind to. Dan, I got to let you go. There's the music. It's time for the show to be over. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got all sorts of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of RBN. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. It is that important. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.